NBC News has learned that Iranian hackers have laid the groundwork to carry out extensive cyber attacks against U.S. and European companies and infrastructure here at home. The U.S. is warning allies and weighing a counterattack, according to 3 senior officials. Joining me now is Sir Peter Westmacott, the former British ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Wendy Sherman, former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, who served as a member of the U.S. negotiating team with North Korea, and, of course, negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, and NBC News national security and military reporter Courtney Kube, who broke the story. Since I'm losing my voice, Courtney, tell us, we're not talking about an imminent threat. We're talking about warnings. Tell us about the Iranian capability.
Exactly. So Iran has been laying the groundwork for potential attack against a couple of thousand individual targets. Now, these are targets that include critical infrastructure here in the United States. It also includes some private industries, including healthcare companies, technology companies, and that includes some U.S. allies in Western Europe and across parts of the Middle East. So the United States has reached out to some of these allies to let them know, and the U.S. has been hardening some of their cyber infrastructure to prepare. As we should say, of course, though, Andrea, it's not imminent, but they are laying the groundwork should there be some sort of a catalyst for a need for them to feel like they needed to respond.
And Sir Peter, this comes as the State Department has sent letters to the big 3 allies, Germany, the UK, France, telling them their companies are not going to be exempt from the sanctions that are being reimposed on Iran as a result of the U.S. getting out of the Iran nuclear deal.
That is right, and this is one of the many reasons why the main European countries were very much opposed to the idea of President Trump walking away from and potentially killing the nuclear deal with Iran. Irrespective of Iran's bad behavior in the region and elsewhere, the nuclear deal addressed nuclear issues, and so walking away from that, we think, was dangerous. And one of the implications is that there may well be this extraterritorial effect on European companies, banks, and everybody else who wants to do business with Iran as a result of continuing and fresh U.S. sanctions. This risks being a serious bone of contention, I think, between Washington and European capitals. And meanwhile, inevitably, as the questions arise about whether the nuclear deal will survive, the Iranians, as you would expect, whether it's in cyber security or whether it's in threatening to restart the manufacture of centrifuges, they are putting in place the necessary things that they will need to do if the deal collapses and if they decide, for their own reasons, that they want to go back to the bad old days before the nuclear deal was concluded.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.